On the podcast with us today is Thomas Konditi, and we have Joshua Stack with us as well. Welcome, gentlemen, to the podcast.
Hey, Dan.
Hey, Dan. Good to see you again.
Thanks. And I want both of you to get us started and give us a little bit of a background about each one of you. I'll start with Thomas, and then I'll turn it over to Josh and have you guys introduce a little bit about yourself and your background and where you are right now on the focus of multifamily.
Sure, Dan. I'm 100% focused on real estate for about the last year or so. Prior to that, I spent 25 years at General Electric, and then I retired from GE, and I've loved real estate ever since I can't even remember. But I picked an area that I thought I understood, which is multifamily, and then I've just been looking at properties, investing here and there. And the interesting thing is doing it from South Africa. My wife is stationed here, and so as we complete her assignment here, I do as much as I can remotely, and then every so often head back to the States. So having a great time.
All right, I'll turn it over here to Josh.
Yeah. So my name is Josh Stack, and my company is called the Stack Company. And my background is in shipping and the oil business. I worked for the Danish conglomerate Maersk for a long time, and I didn't quite get into the point of being able to retire like Thomas. I got fired. Not for anything I did. It's just that the oil business had a rough few years, and finally management changes caught up with me. And as I was reevaluating what my sort of professional life was going to look like, I ended up reading Rich Dad Poor Dad and settling on real estate as being my second career. So been doing this full time for a year and a half now, and focusing on multifamily exclusively since June of 2018.
Well, I know I'm looking forward to hearing about the property that you guys are going to be talking about, which is the townhomes at Humboldt Place. But before we dive into that property, I want to first kind of, figure out, how you guys got together, because it sounds like you guys came from two different kind of backgrounds. One of you is in South Africa, and, you're obviously, Josh, now in Charlotte, North Carolina. I know you were in Denmark, but now you're here in the States. So how did you guys meet and form this partnership?
Well, I mean, besides the fact that I think we look good together, just kidding. But I think it was very interesting, and I think it's interesting as much in how it's progressed. But back in, I think in March of last year, or actually earlier than that, I was looking at a set of properties in Charlotte, and I put a bid in, and ended up doing the inspection, coming back, and taking the amount down because of what we found in the place, and then finally closing on the place. And about a month later, I get this message from on Bigger Pockets from this gentleman out of Charlotte, and he says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about the properties you just bought. And I responded after a couple of weeks, and it's Josh, and he says, hey, I just want to know, how did you get those units, that property in Charlotte? And I didn't know where it was coming from, but he, I just said, look, and I went in, I gave him the story I just gave you. And he says, because I bid on those units, and I bid higher than the price that you bought them for. And and the guy told me that there was a higher bidder out there. So what happened? And as it turns out, the reason I got it for a lower price was, both septic tanks fell in, the foundation needed $20,000 worth of work, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that obviously wasn't very clear unless you were doing the inspection. But from that point, just being interested in the same area, the same kind of properties, we just started talking about, what we're doing. And I think the underlying sort of partnership discussion really came around because we're pretty much on the same track. We both had corporate backgrounds. We've both, Josh has been stationed in Africa just as much as I have. And then we had the same end goals. We're trying to build up a portfolio, long-term buy and hold. It's supposed to form part of our family wealth. And so we spend a lot of time just sort of, we're on the same path. And then Josh found, and he'll talk to you about sort of how he finds deals, which I think is fascinating. But he found a deal that we could go in together, and I said, why not? And that's the property we're going to talk about right now. And we've been doing this, Josh, for 7 months now, 8 months?
Yeah, 7, 8 months. 7, 8 months.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, Thomas and I were both doing real estate from abroad by
Yeah.
ourselves for almost a year. And like,
Yeah.
I think our wives were going crazy with us wanting to
Yeah.
talk to them about real estate. And of course, they've got their own day jobs and taking care of their kids and stuff. And like when Thomas and I found each other and we had somebody to go back and forth with and spar with and really transfer ideas with and talk about things and sort of clarify what we were trying to do and like make sense off each other. It was just became a really great sounding board and partnership between us.
Well, let's dive into this deal because I know, Josh, you mentioned, or Thomas mentioned you having a unique way of being able to find deals. So how did you find this particular deal that we're going to talk about today?
Yep. So again, this goes back to kind of how I got into real estate. I started off on the single family track, buying some homes here in the counties west of Charlotte, a little bit less expensive homes, 30, 40 range, shopping on the MLS and with a couple brokers from abroad. And I was able to get 6 homes in the first part of 2018. Just sort of sat back as I was on vacation with the family and like really thought about, what's the scalability of this? I've now got six homes in addition to the 2 that I already had. How am I going to scale this out? And like, it just, a linear progression was just not going to do it for me. And that's what was going to happen with single family. So I kind of decided in June last year that I've got to commit to multifamily and I've got to buy some larger properties. And how the heck am I going to do that from abroad? I spent a week cold emailing and cold calling brokers and trying to like figure out who are the best brokers in the 6 counties around here. And these are fairly rural counties west of Charlotte, and so it's just not a highly developed um, uh, commercial real estate landscape like it is in Charlotte itself. I didn't really get anywhere with that, and I thought, well, now what can I do? And I kind of came back to a direct mail campaign, something that seemed attainable. And so what I did was I went into the local county GIS, the Geographical Information Systems, and I was able to download the entire GIS files and get all of the data on all of the properties in the county. And those are Excel files. And at least here in Gaston County, they've got parcel CAMA data, which is pretty detailed data on every parcel. And then using Excel, I was able to filter, well, my wife was able to filter that spreadsheet for me and run some pivot tables and stuff. And so I narrowed those 30,000 lines down to 1,000 or 2,000 lines of multifamily properties. And then I did that for Gaston County and Cleveland County here in Western North Carolina. And I came up with a list. I sorted out everything that was owned by an LLC or owned by a company. I thought they're probably not going to respond to a direct mail campaign. So then I was left with a list of about 1,000 or 1,200 properties that were owned in individual owners' names. And I pulled all this data for free out of the GIS and put it into an Excel file. And then manually, I Google Mapped property, throughout the wooden duplexes from the 40s that were in terrible shape that I didn't want to buy anyway. And I was left with some small apartment buildings, small apartment complexes, a lot of duplexes. And then I did a 200 piece mail campaign over 6 months. And I did that through one of the direct mail campaigns, not the Yellow Letters guy, but Open Letter Marketing. They have a really great product of a 6 mailer campaign where it's pretty much done for you, and they send it in really attractive envelopes, handwritten, printed letters. And actually on the first mailing, the gentleman that owned this property that we're talking about today, he called me. And when I Google mapped it, I kind of, and we'll give the address out later, and you can have an idea of what it looks like on Google Maps. But it's got sort of these handmade signs posted up around the property of like no parking on the grass and no trespassing and stuff like that. And I knew as soon as I Google mapped that, it's like, this is owned by an old dude or an old couple, and they're just self-managing this thing. And it's just sort of like the classic undermanaged mom and pop property. And sure enough, the guy called me, and we were able to he told me what the rent roll was. That turned out to not exactly be the truth in the end, or sort of an idealized version of whatever his rent roll was. And we did some back of the envelope math, and I gave him a verbal offer, and he said he would take that. And so then we were off to the races. And the initial purchase price is 10 units. The initial purchase price was going to be $350,000. So that's what we went in under contract with.
So 10 units, 350,000.
Yeah. Yeah. And the rent roll at the time was said to be $6,000 a month. So all 10 units were occupied at $600 a month. And those rents were way under market.
And where do you feel like you can get the rents to?
So the property is located at 200 East Glendale Avenue in Mount Holly, North Carolina. Mount Holly is a suburb of Charlotte on the west side. It's a really nice little town. This is located 3 blocks off downtown Mount Holly, which has gone through a revitalization in the last 15 years. And we have no doubt that we're going to get at least $850 a month for renovated units.
And excuse me, on this particular property being $6,000 per month, what were the expenses on it?
Yeah.
That's how much information we got.
That's about how much information we got. I mean, this was so mom and pop. The gentleman who owned it before us, he was in his mid 80s, or he is in his mid 80s. He had owned this since the early 1970s, shortly after they were built, and he had been self-managing them since the early 70s. And like, he kept a little notebook in his pocket where he would write down how much rent people had paid, whether in cash or by whatever other means. And that was about it. And like, he didn't really have any bills. He had the city water bill, and he could show us an insurance bill, which turned out to be, it was not right. It was not right. And that was about it. Oh, and he had a garbage bill because he pays for garbage. And that was about it. And we just couldn't get any information from him. And that was like one of the really difficult things with this transaction was the owner, he did not use any technology whatsoever. So very quickly after visiting and doing an initial, I guess very quickly it became evident that if we wanted to actually get a contract in place with this gentleman, we were going to need some on the ground support. So we reached out and we found a local broker who was willing to support us and sort of come in and be a buyer's agent and do the liaison between the seller and ourselves. And we negotiated 2% commission for him. So we brought him in just because we needed some on the ground support. We couldn't do it from abroad due to the nature of the seller.
And maybe a comment on the just the information is, I think when we first got the info, first of all, it was 600 a unit on everything was full, but then the expenses were down at like 30%. And so, one of two things is happening there. One is either this is the best run place in the world, or there's a lot of deferred maintenance, right? And that's I think what you find out when you actually get somebody in there.
Yeah. So one of the kind of questions I'm thinking in my head here is did you get any other responses from that direct mail campaign, or has this been the only one that's really come out of it so far?
No, I had about a 2% response rate to the first that went out. I was actually quite surprised. Got between 4 and 10 calls. Some were tire kickers. This one was serious. There was another one that was serious. I got a gentleman who called me actually when I was on site doing the inspection at the 10 unit. He called me. He said, "Hey, you sent me a letter about wanting to buy my apartment." I said, "Yes, sir. I'm inspecting another building right now. I can't really talk to you. Can I call you back?" He said, "Yeah, that's great, but if you want to buy my apartment, it's got 75 others attached to it." So I was like, okay, all right. So I took that as information, and we can circle back to that one at the end. But yeah, I've had good response to it. I was really pleased. It was, my wife and I say going into it, it cost us $1,200. It was about $1 a piece of mail, and if we got one deal out of it, it was going to pay for itself. And sure enough, we got one deal out of it, and it did pay for itself. And we got a number of other leads, a lot of duplex calls, which in the end, I wasn't interested in buying into those just because I'm now looking at larger multifamily, but I've sort of forwarded those leads on to other investors locally, and they follow them up.
So when are you going to do the next mailer?
Well, the six month campaign is completed, so that's done. So that mail campaign's done, and Thomas and I really need to talk about, are we going to do another mail campaign? Do we want to go further out into the counties that are a little bit further out, or do we want to stay closer to the metro area? So no immediate plans to do another one, but I would absolutely do one after this experience. And I would recommend open marketing to anyone who wants to do it right now.
And the group you used was Open Letter Marketing?
Yeah, Open Letter Marketing.
Okay, all right. And so how did you structure the deal? Or let me ask you this. Is it just you two as far as investors in this deal, or did you have outside investors as well?
Just the two of them.
Okay, so just you two are in the deal, and how did you guys structure that deal? You guys just in it 50-50, or is there a different split because maybe somebody's doing something more than the other one, or how do you guys typically work your partnership?
Thomas, you want to take that?
Yeah, look, I think so. We went in 50-50 on the equity contribution, and the view was that we would be 50-50 really going forward. If there's any capital calls, we do things 50-50. But I think reflecting the fact, and you can see, I'm in South Africa. Josh is in Charlotte, and he's going to be working through the painful months of renovation. So we kind of we tinkered with the profit split and the proceeds split, so it would reflect that additional effort put in, which works, I think, well for the interest. And then, depending on what comes up with the next property, we'll probably shift it around.
Sure. And as far as the management of the property, it sounds to me like the older gentleman that had the property before was probably self-managing it, which is out of his left pocket, if you will. But do you guys actually have somebody else that's going to be managing this as a third-party management company, or are you guys self-managing it? Maybe Josh is handling that piece of it.
No, we're employing a professional manager, and what's good about our manager, they just so happen to be located in the same town. They're a 5-minute drive away, and they manage a 5-unit that's virtually identical from a floor plan standpoint. That's 3 doors down. So we use a local property manager, and Thomas and my goal is to have 400 to 500 units in our portfolio in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, and we want to be chairman of that portfolio. We want to be managing the managers who are professionally employed to run it. We won't be property managers ourselves.
Sure. Well, and I think that also helps, you allow you to be able to grow because you're not having to worry about focusing on managing the properties as much. You're just managing the managers. And so it allows you to go find that next deal as well. So I think you can scale a lot faster that way. As far as the CapEx on this one, you bought it for $350. What did you guys project as far as capital expenditures on this one to renovate it?
So that was really interesting. I mean, a little bit of naivety going into it. My initial was like, okay, well, $50,000, we'll be able to clean it up and make it look nice, spit shine it, and be able to raise the rents $100 or $150 a piece. When we got on the ground, I came into Charlotte, flew from Denmark in August to do the inspection. And as we did the inspection, it was just like total deferred maintenance. I mean, it was rubber bands and duct tape was what was happening for the last 20, 30 years on these properties. So, I mean, there's water damage on the interior where the tubs have linked. There was a roofer who came by. He was only about 120 pounds. And as he was walking across the roof, he said, up here, I may fall through. And, the were like mishmash. Some of the air handlers were original. There was a three-ton unit that had been installed, a 3-ton condenser. There was a 1.5-ton condenser on another unit. So it's really rubber bands and duct tape. So our CapEx budget ballooned to $100,000 very quickly, and then it ballooned to, what did it end up, Thomas? Or in the original business case before we had the G
350.
Yeah. So suddenly we realized that we were going to be putting more than $300,000 into this property, which was equivalent to the purchase price, right? After that week of having the inspection and whatnot, we went back and we had to retrade with the sellers, and we had to go back to them and say, there's $100,000 in CapEx that has to happen today that is unrelated to our business case, just to maintain the integrity of these apartments. I mean, they're falling apart. You have to put $100,000 in today just to maintain them, not let alone trying to improve them to increase rents.
Wow. So did you end up settling on the 350 after that, or did you offer first the 350 and then you retraded for lower than that once you found out those issues?
We retraded for lower. We said we need if we're going to go through with this deal, we need $100,000 price reduction. And I had a very long discussion with the sellers, and super cordial. I mean, they've been married over 50 years, and they were just really, really pleasant people to deal with. But the owner, he was a bit of a horse trader, so he knew what he was doing in the negotiations. And at some point, I was still $100,000, and he offered $15,000 reduction. we just had to end the meeting and say, I'm flying back on Saturday. This is Thursday. And, we'll end it here and we'll shake hands and walk away friends. And that's what we did. Of course, we knew that wasn't going to be the end of it. I called him later in the day and said, I'm here till Saturday. If you want me to come back, let me know. And I ended up going back with him on Saturday, meeting them without the broker, just the two owners, the husband and the wife. And we settled on $265 as the purchase price. So they gave us an $85,000 reduction.
So the original offer was $350. Then you did some due diligence and found some deferred maintenance, and then was able to go back and retrade to $265.
Yeah, exactly.
And what did that end up making your entry cap? I know that's probably hard to project because you didn't really have expenses really, laid out very well. But
well, if you just took the 265 and thought you could get 60. Thought you could get $600 bucks a unit out of there, then you're probably talking about just above 9.
Was that with a 30% expense that was in place, or was that with doing like a 50% expense ratio?
That was getting closer to 40, 45.
Okay.
Because again, you're not. I mean, to Josh's point, you're not trying to do anything special to get it up. But obviously, we don't want to stay at the low end mark. So we had to go to we went to the full CapEx model.
Yeah. And in reality, even though he said the rent roll was $6,000 a month, he was only collecting about $4,500 a month. So he was just letting people slide. I mean, he had some tenants that were thousands of dollars behind, and he wouldn't even evict them. He would just tell them they had to move, and then would give them 2 weeks to sort of move out. So it was a very laissez-faire attitude to actually managing the property.
So what other issues came out during the due diligence process?
You name it, it came up.
Well, at least nothing legal. I think the good thing is nothing from a title legal. I mean, you didn't even have sort of, you didn't have any crime or any of that stuff. I think it was really just, you had a property that at one point was 10 great units, and it just over time just ratcheted down. And now if you want it back, you can put it back to and I'd say it was kind of a C- property in a B+ neighborhood. So kind of your, a great catch, but you got to get it from C- to B+.
Yeah.
So did you guys have to put any money up on this particular property when you got it under contract?
We had a $5,000 due diligence fee. And this is another thing. I mean, like your guest, Rama, I listened to his podcast the other night. He with this contract, right? Because he wrote into the contract that the due diligence would only start when all the documentation was received by the seller. So we had a big long list of documents that need to be received by the seller. So technically our due diligence never even started because we never got any documentation from the seller. So, I mean, at the closing table, we could have pulled out and from a technical contractual standpoint, gotten our money back. But we did put $5,000 down as an escrow deposit.
Okay. And how did you guys end up financing this deal?
Tom?
Yeah, no, I think this was an interesting one. So we went to the big guys. We went to guys like Wells Fargo and I've done business with them before, but this is a construction loan at the end of the day, because you're gonna take some portion for the acquisition, and then you're gonna need almost the exact same amount, if not more, for the upgrade and the renovation. So it qualifies as a construction loan. We talked to, I think it was 3 different community banks, local banks to the area there, and I think we got offers from all 3 to do a construction loan. And remember, this is first time Thomas and first time Josh on a 10 unit, right? So I think they're taking a risk here on, can you actually get the construction done? But and I'll use this term a little bit during our discussion, is this is a lab for us, right? We've got to learn with our, get our hands dirty. You're going to spend a little bit of money to go to school on something like this, but it's a lab. We're going to figure out certain things as we go along, and certain things we're going to remember for the bigger deals. But I think for the bank, it's the same thing. It's, look, these guys seem like they're, they can rub 2 shekels together, or rand, whichever we want to look at it. And so we got a construction loan just south of 6%, 20-year amortization, and it was split in two. They gave us 80. It was an 80-20 equity debt. So they gave us a portion for the acquisition, and that closed at closing. Or we got that at closing, and then we're putting in the rest for the construction component. That's going to be again 350 or above, and that's an in-process story. So we'll have to come back and give you how all of that works out, because that's a story too. But yeah,
we'll definitely have to have a part 2 to this one for sure.
Yeah, you know what? One thing I thought, yeah, definitely, and one thing that I thought was interesting is, even after we settled on one of the banks, we still had interest from other banks, from the other bank, that said, look, we'd like to place our money with you. It seems like a great deal. Can we get in for, give you a little bit better terms? So I'd say that my financing lesson on this one in my little lab here is, there's money out there for all sorts of strange, interesting things. And, don't sell yourself short and think, you can only get it from, 75% on a big bank.
Were you going to say something, Josh?
Yeah, I think the only relevant financing term that you didn't mention, Thomas, was that we got a 7-year loan. There's a balloon after 7 years, but we wanted the longest debt that we could get. And so it came down to a 5-year or 7-year loan from either the local bank, and we chose the 7-year loan.
Did you get any IO?
The interest-only period is the construction period, which is 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, so we're on interest-only now, but as soon as the construction closes, then we go to principal and interest payments over the amortization.
And did they start to charge you for the piece of the construction right now, or is that just only started to be charged once you draw it down?
Drawdown.
Okay.
Drawdown. So so the interest we're paying is on the 80% of the 265 that we bought it for, and then then it kind of flips around. We have to put our remaining 20% in before the bank kicks it on their loan. So, when we get the project started, or as we get the project started, we put the remainder of our equity, and then you start getting drawdowns. And technically the interest payment is supposed to go up based on how much has been dispersed month to month, but we'll move probably a couple months, so it'll be fast enough. It'll just shift into the final structure.
So when you guys came to the closing table, how much money did you guys, have to come to the table with?
20% of 265.
Okay.
Plus closing costs, about 60 odd.
Okay. And then you have another 350 in CapEx. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you have to come up with another 20%, so another 70,000 from that.
Yep.
And then are you required to do it all within 6 months, and after that it goes away, or can you still do some after that? Or or do you have to do everything within that 6 months, and whatever you don't draw down, you don't get access to?
I don't think there's any limit on tapping into the remainder of the loan. The incentive is for us to get it done in the 6 months, because you're obviously your IO, your interest only, is a benefit there. And then, if you don't have tenants in, then you're now fielding all the rest of that from your pocket. So I think it's more of an incentive versus a restriction.
Yeah. Okay. So basically you have 6 months of IO, but you would still be you would basically be starting to pay more than you'd be paying the principal and the interest after 6 months. But you could still draw down some more later.
So your interest only is maybe $1,000, but then it pops up to 3,500 or plus or minus in 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this is one of the great things. I mean, we're with a community bank. They've got less than 10 or 12 branches. So, as things change, like we have a high level of confidence that we can go talk to our banker if we need an extra couple months on the interest only period. I'm pretty sure that we could have that discussion and work something out with them. It's not like working with a regional bank or even a big bank where it's just like, this is the way it is, take it or leave it.
So is the plan to hold on to this thing long term in this particular product, or are you wanting to also try to refinance it to pull out some equity in maybe like a year or two down the road?
Well, maybe I'll take that one. I think we kind of started off with, we're long-term buy and holds. We expect 10 years, 15 years, this is going to still be out there. But should the opportunity come up that's, where our equity might be better placed somewhere else, then I think there's an option there. Now, interestingly, with the 7-year loan from this bank, there's a prepay penalty. I think it's, what is it, 3 years? If you do anything in 3 years, or
I think
just
we
not.
negotiate to 2-1, 2-year.
Yeah. So you can't really just go do a flip or a refi, 6 months down the road. So, our intention was buy and hold, and that's the loan they gave us.
So when you're doing your modeling on a project like this, you guys aren't really concerned really about the IRR. You're more looking at the on the year-over-year cash yield, correct?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense, because obviously when you're doing a buy and hold and it's just two people into the deal, it's more like, all right, if I put this money here, am I going to be able to get more? What's the minimum amount of cash that I'm looking for out of that deal? And then possibly down the road, is there an opportunity to either refinance or sell to get a better deal? Then hey, we'll consider it, but right now that's not how we're modeling it.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yep.
As far as the tenants are concerned, I want to go back to that for just a minute, because I had a thought that came up in my head as I was listening to some other things you were saying. Are the tenants that are in there right now, are they all month to month, or are they all on long-term leases?
There were no leases. And where there were leases, it was a one-page lease that didn't really correspond to the name of the tenant that was actually living there. So there were no leases. So then our situation just kind of fell back on North Carolina law. And what we did, as soon as we closed in early November, we sent, the property manager went by and we sent certified letters to everybody explaining the property's now in new hands, and there's going to be some renovations that are going to be happening, and sort of let everybody know who we are and what we're about and what the new rules are and the new expectations for paying rent. And then just before Thanksgiving, we served everyone notice that in one building they need to be out by the 4th of January so we can start construction early January, and then the other building they need to be out by the end of January. So we gave everybody at least 45 days notice to get out and move on to the next place that they wanted to live in, just simply because the construction is going to be so all consuming that nobody could live there during this period. And that was a little bit of an adventure, sort of getting everybody out and trying to get the place emptied. And we're still dealing with that today.
So you went from 100% occupancy to trying to get it to 0% occupancy, so you can go in there and do a full rehab. And how long are you projecting that you're going to have 0% occupancy?
Well, I guess we're at 10% occupancy today, which is mid-February, because we've got one tenant left. So we're at 90% unoccupied, and hopefully that tenant will be gone in the next week or two. And then construction should be starting soon, estimated 75 days. So we're still okay with getting the market and ready to come to market with new fresh units at the end of April, mid-April. So I think, Tom, you did some more underwriting now, and your modeling says we're full by June.
Yeah, we should be full by June, but you're talking about 4 months. We baked in close to 5 months of no revenue, and again, the interest only. The costs shrink down pretty significantly after tenants move out. But I think one thing that is important is you bring it up, is you went from 100% occupancy or plus or minus down to now 0. That's a pretty big risk to take. And we thought long and hard, because we have 2 buildings with 5 each. Do you do one building and let the other building kind of, just keep running? We talked it over with the banker, and we said, look, there's a couple ways we can do this. We can either slow roll this thing and do a building at a time, and that's a little less risky, or we just pull the trigger, have everybody move out, have the guys come in. And every construction guy you talk to said, look, except for one guy wanted 1 unit every month. The other construction guys said, just get everybody out and let me blow through there, because then I can sort of do a conveyor belt and just sequence my demo, then my mechanicals, etc. So that's why we chose just go with the 100%, and as long as we can cover, worst cases, again, this is not much more than the cost of a house. As long as I can pay $1,000 a month, I'm out of trouble for 6 months.
Yeah, and the reality of it was that the tenants were unfortunately so poor quality, and they had such bad tenant habits that they weren't paying anyway. So like even if we had let people stay, they quit paying. So we haven't received any rent since 1st of December. As soon as people figured out what was going on, they just quit paying and started staying there. They started continuing to live there without paying.
And what are you doing during the for each unit with the renovations? Let's start with the interior first, and then kind of talk about the exterior.
Yeah. So interior, I mean, it's everything. The only thing we're not doing is removing sheetrock, and we're not redoing the electrical, and we're not redoing the plumbing. Anything's behind the walls. The bathrooms are going to be all new floors, new painting, removed popcorn ceiling, all new appliances, all new kitchen layout, all new kitchen cabinets. So everything's going to be new, including the HVAC and the water heaters. So, I mean, it's a total rehab. And I guess the thing that we probably didn't realize going in was like it just been neglected for so long that all of the infrastructure for the building is just completely shot. So there's just so much to catch up on that it blows the business case out of the water a little bit. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast with this area, this county, and the vintage properties that are around. There's a lot of 5-unit buildings that were built in the 70s and just haven't been maintained over the last 40 years.
Any exterior?
Yeah, I mean, exterior is top to bottom. So we've done roofs as the 120-pound guy taught us. We're doing the asphalt. There's potholes and cracks in the paving. So the parking lot's going to be redone, and then the landscaping. There's grass, but it's either chewed up or muddied down or whatever. But if you can see that if you just put a few $1,000 into the grass and the landscaping, you have some garden townhomes. Right, which I think can take us maybe $50-100 higher than even we were expecting. So I think it's everything. It's when you drive by or when you come up to the place after it's done, you should see what looks like it won't be new because the design is still the old design, but everything you're going to see is refreshed. Now,
I would love to see some pictures
siding
of this thing now.
Yeah, well,
before and
we
after.
have a few.
And the other thing is there's probably 10 small apartment complexes within half mile of downtown Mount Holly, and our goal is to make the one that looks and feels the nicest, and therefore we can charge premium rents for that.
And your projection is to do $850 a month
on the low end.
Yeah, that's the underwriting, but we really think we can do better.
Yeah. So where do you think you can? Where do you? Well, let me ask you this: when May, June comes around, what are you guys going to try to market it for to try to get?
I think Josh got his network tightened up, but yeah. So look, the properties in the area or the other comps are doing somewhere between $950 and above $1,000. So. Now, when you get to 1,000, that's I think there's a psychological point there. There's also some of those places are they have the clubhouse amenities, et cetera, which we're not going to put in. So I think we'll start out and see if $950 works. And my sense is if we get the aesthetics right and the quality right on the place, that should be doable.
Now, are you going to put some upgraded features like maybe some crown molding or some granite countertops or anything nice like that? Or are you going to kind of keep them pretty standard in that market?
Granite countertops. That's Josh's favorite worst word. I mean, you have to make a call here, right? You have to make a call. Who are you going to put into this place?
Yeah.
We're aiming for professionals. You're aiming for teachers, policemen, et cetera. It's not, we're not looking at luxury. So we looked at possibly putting granite in, and then from a pricing standpoint, we had to make some calls on a few different things. We're putting in windows, windows and doors. So all this stuff starts adding up. We're going for something that is really refreshed but professional. So not. I mean, there won't be crown molding. We even pulled out the USB charger wall sockets that I was so excited by. I thought I was going to be a millennial now. I could put my little USB, but no, we're just going to have regular plugs.
You're not going to be living there, Thomas. That's the hardest part about doing renovations is doing a renovation of a place that you're not going to be there in,
Yeah.
Yeah.
something that would be nice for you, but you're not building the property that you're going to be staying in. So,
Yeah.
so I have two last questions to wrap up our conversation today. And the first one is about, what did you find was the easiest during the entire process that maybe you thought originally was going to be a little bit harder?
For me, it was definitely the bank loan. Like that was far easier than I thought it was going to be. Now, granted, this is it all told, it's a $600,000 project, and Thomas and I have fairly strong balance sheets. But I thought we were going to get more pushback on the lending side of it.
And so on the opposite side of that, the last question I have is, what did you find that was harder than expected that you thought might be a little bit easier going into it?
Can I? I'll give you mine. Look, I've watched, I think, 7 series of Flip or Flop and every other interesting show. I'm just like, this construction renovation thing, rip out the bathroom, $8,000, do the kitchen, 10,000. I thought it was going to be a little bit more along the lines of a contractor would know what to do. And I'd say we probably spent 60 days of back and forth with the contractor on everything down to the knobs and the paint types and all this stuff that I just thought was a lot more effort. And then getting a good contractor to stick was a lot harder than I think we thought.
Maybe you guys are just being very difficult, not sellers, but owners.
I don't know, Josh. I mean, we started off with I can give you $350,000. Can you do all this stuff? And it just never worked out that way. I think one thing is, there's a big difference between a contractor who's willing to come to your house and redo your kitchen or something like that versus a REIT savvy contractor, right? Somebody who says, look, I know you guys are investors. You're trying to put in minimum investment for maximum impact. Let me tell you how to do it. And I think once you find, you can spend a lot of time dating the onesie twosies. You got to find the people who are good at doing the 10s and 20s and the hundreds.
Yeah, and I think there's also an element here of, Thomas has long experience with GE in Africa. He's negotiated with governments for locomotive contracts and power generation contracts. And I've worked in the oil industry for a while. So dealing with 100-page, 150-page ExxonMobil contract or Chevron contract, like we're pretty fluent in that type of work. And then we've sort of bring that corporate attitude towards dealing with local contractors who may be working on not even a regional basis, but a local basis. And like there's a mismatch there. So I think, yes, in some ways we're difficult.
Yeah.
To deal with.
We wanted a contract.
We also have to calibrate ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us here today and going over this property in the Charlotte market, the townhomes at Humboldt Place. Obviously, there's definitely going to be a part 2 because we want to get you back on in a couple of months after you've had some time to get the contractors in place and do some of the renovations and then see, where were you able to push these rents to. And so we're going to call this one part 1. And then in about 6 to 9 months, we'll reach out to you, or you guys reach out to me and say, hey, we're ready to do part 2. And whether it's good or bad, I still want to talk about it, right? Because either way, we can learn about things.
Just a little teaser for the listeners. So just to sort of briefly tell you the story of what we got to tell the next time. So we spent 60 days negotiating the contract, right? And we spec'd it out down to the doorknobs that we wanted and the poles that we wanted. We were going to start construction on January 7th. January 4th, we get an email from somebody at the construction company who we've never talked to before. His email says he's the CEO, and he says, we don't want to do this project anymore.
Part 2.
Part two.
Definitely, for sure. Well, I know I'm looking forward to part 2 because I know you guys are looking forward to part 2 as well because you're still in the middle of part 2. So we'll wrap up this one today and get you back in for part 2. But if the listeners have questions for either one of you, and what's the best way for them to reach out to you and maybe ask some questions or start to follow you a little bit?
Well, I mean, maybe the easiest thing is the Humboldt Place. We have HumboldtPlace.net. So info at HumboldtPlace.net. That's HUMBOLD like Delta T place.net, and we'll be able to get our emails through that. Don't spam us.
Well, we'll make sure that we don't. I put it into the actual show notes, because a lot of times when you put it in the show notes, the little web scrapers will pick it up and stuff. So,
Sure.
But for those of you who are listening, you want to shoot them over an email, send them over an email if you have any questions about this. Info at Humboldt Place, HUMBOLDT Place, and that's .net.
Yep.
.net. Well, thank you again so much, guys, for coming on. Go ahead, Josh. Thomas, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I just thought about this. You can use either Thomas at HumboldtPlace.net or Josh at HumboldtPlace.net.
Okay. Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much. Looking forward to having you on part 2 in a few months.
All righty. Thanks,
Dan.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.